I want to mention this real quick about educational engineering and the Native Americans. John Leland said this: "Where do Christians learn the lesson that religion and education stand on the same footing? The first originates in heaven, the last arises among men. What is more common than for men of the greatest science to be the farthest from Christian piety, while the most illiterate are filled with the Spirit? It should never be forgotten that there is no object of legislation but what natural men as such can understand and legislate upon. But the things of the Spirit which belong to the Messiah's kingdom are out of the reach of merely wise men, and therefore do not come within the compass of legislation. Religion and education do not therefore stand on the same ground. For education is an article which natural men can legislate upon with understanding." That was what John Leland said. The government orchestration of education establishments to reconstruct society into a new social order was continually applied to the American Indians. The modern emphasis on critical thinking skills, encouraging an abandonment of morality and an atheistic approach to values and humanity came from the yoking together of religion and education in attempting to civilize the tribal people in America. This process led to a subtle undermining of religious liberty and allowed education to become used predominantly as an avenue for socialism. The Christianization of America. The great mistake of the New England fathers lay in taking the laws of Moses for the commands of Christ and blending the Jewish and Christian dispensations together, and indeed from this source have originated all the evils which have overrun the Christian world and deluged it with blood. By this means, unholy men are entrusted with the regulation of religious concerns. That's what David Benedict said. Isaac Backus in 1779 wrote, "If any inquire how tyranny, simony, and robbery came to be practiced so long under the Christian name, the answer is plain from the word of truth. It was by deceitful reasonings from the handwritings which Christ blotted out and nailed to his cross. In those writings, direction was given to Israel to seize the lands and goods of heathens, to make slaves of them, and in other respects to make a visible distinction in their dealings betwixt their own brethren and all others. And who can describe all the superstition, blind devotion, and church tyranny that have been brought in by deceitful reasonings from thence?" The foremost principle of the Puritan regime in Massachusetts was that the will and the interest of the individual should be rigidly subordinated to those of the community. The Christian discovery teaching so commonly found in Christian education is derived from the old Puritan belief system and is still found among modern theonomy advocates and in popular dominion theology. The basic premise of it is that it is a Christian's responsibility to take the reins of control out of the hands of the ungodly and implement control under a Christian nation. The dominion ideology is similar to global socialism in its stress upon complete social, economic, and religious transformation of the entire world. This subtle distortion of biblical Christianity gives the appearance that Christianity is no different than any other belief or educational system in the area of social progress, and therefore can be legislated by Congress. In 1832, Congress appointed Elbert Herring as Commissioner of Indian Affairs, the first to hold such office. In Herring's first report, he briefly gave a fitting description of Christianization as a mixture of education and the doctrines of the Christian religion, all centering in one grand object, the substitution of the social for the savage state. The government continued to use education as an avenue to legislate religion under the cloak of civilization and the greater good of the Indians. The principal lever by which the Indian is to be lifted out of the mire of folly and vice is education. Thus too only is it conceived are men to be Christianized. That is out of the documents of United States Indian policies. Also, at the same time, a plan was discussed before Congress for establishing a large central school for the education of the Western Indians. On November 30th, 1848, the annual report of Indian Affairs stated the purpose of education through Indian schools so that a physical, intellectual, moral, and religious education will all be imparted together. Nothing can induce him to labor unless compelled to do so by a stern necessity, and it is only then that there is any ground to work upon for civilizing and Christianizing him. In 1869, the Board of Indian Commissioners emphatically stated the government's purpose in the education of the American Indian desired the humanization, civilization, and Christianization of the Indian. Christianity and education are not the same. They should be distinguished, separated, and kept separate.